Hi, team. It's nice to see you guys. This is the most exciting panel of the day, no doubt. My name is Thayer Lavielle, for those that I don't know out there, and we are here to really talk about this incredible panel around advancing equity in women's sports and how to do that really through the executive level specifically. And I wanted to really talk about and level set how women's sports is just experience this incredible seismic shift, which I think is actually influencing the rest of the sports ecosystem in many, many ways. It's a bit of a test laboratory in some ways, and it's also one that's leading by example in others. Infrastructure is being built in a new way. We have brand new women audiences coming in to witness women's sports, but also driving from a broader consumer perspective. We have just increases in attendance, increases in merchandise, increases in sponsorship, increases in huge investments that these valuations seems to rise every single day. But really, it's also about where women are showing up in the leadership ranks and throughout organizations, throughout sport, which is also exciting. And so rather than just kind of cheerleading this progress on, it's really about pressing deeper into these questions and issues. And today I've got four of the smartest people in the business here to help us lead this discussion. And so as I look away from all of you guys, I'm looking at my screen so I make sure that I'm doing this correctly. But I wanted to first introduce my co-panelists, I should say, because I really would like this to be a discussion team. The first person I wanted to introduce is DeRetta Rhodes, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Culture Officer for the Atlanta Braves. She is one of the most influential culture builders in professional sports, driving a meaningful inclusion in community, really engagement across all of MLB, but like really just creating a sense of unity and purpose in a new way. Danette Leighton is the CEO of the Women's Sports Foundation. She is leading the charge to expand access, opportunity, and visibility for girls in sports through advocacy, research, and grant making, among many other roles that she's had in the past throughout the entire sports ecosystem. Pete Giorgio is U.S. Sports Practice Lead at Deloitte and a strategist at the forefront of innovation and investment in the sports industry. He also brings a critical lens on equity, technology, and transformation. And as a side note, has really been the seed thinker around a new initiative called the Athena Pledge, which is what it was originally called. Pete, I'm not sure what we're calling it these days. And Nancy Stewart, who is the VP of People and Culture for the San Diego Wave FC, which has shown such huge success since its launch and obviously risen in massive valuations and lives in the enviable locale of San Diego. But you're really redefining not only what people and culture look like, but also what success looks like in professional sports, proving that smart business strategy and equity can go hand in hand. And so I just am so honored to talk with all of you guys today. So thank you for taking the time to spend it with us today. So this conversation, as you guys know, is going to explore how we move really from progress to kind of permanence in a lot of these changes, and how can we not slip back in any of these gains that we've made across the ecosystem. We all know that equity isn't just the right thing to do. It actually drives good business. So I wanted to kind of dive in and lead off with some questions here. Pete, I'm actually going to start with you, just kind of trying to establish the landscape and the urgency around making sure that we continue to push on further progress, further growth. I mean, there's so many levers within the women's sports ecosystem that are cracked, fissured, broken, need a lot of repairing. We're not even sure if they grew right, all of those things. So there's a lot of room for rediscovery and developing new ways. So how would you actually think about the current state of equity in sports, from leadership, representation, investment, visibility? What gives you like the most optimism throughout this, and where do you still see the gaps?
Yeah, thanks there, and thanks for including me today. This is amazing, and everyone else, is good to see you. I'd say I'll start with the gaps there. I mean, I think we all know there's still a lot of gaps out there, and I'd say and I think we're going to get into this a little bit, gaps at all levels, right? I mean, all the way down in youth sports, we don't have enough women coaches for women's sports or girls sports. Certainly in the front office, we don't have enough women in those positions. But even in places that are, I would say, in some ways, the sort of different parts of the sports ecosystem. Trainers, coaches. When I think of motorsports, we don't have enough women in technology jobs. Within motorsports, which are huge parts of that too. So I'd say still significant gaps, and those gaps lead to all sorts of challenges, both in terms of decision making, but also, like you mentioned, representation. Um, so a lot of holes that we need to fill. But I have a lot of optimism for that. Because I do believe it's something that's becoming more, thanks to folks like Danette and others, it's becoming more and more recognized every day that these gaps exist and that they are not just in one place. It's not just executives. It's not just coaches. It's not just engineers. It's across the board. But B, also the rapid growth in women's sports. I mean, you mentioned the valuations. We've talked a lot about revenue. We are in the hockey stick part of the growth of this industry, and the real opportunity for us, but the challenge is where and how do we take all those dollars and address this problem amongst the others that are happening as well. So definitely gaps, but I see a lot of opportunity to actually really address those moving forward.
Thanks. DeRetta, I think when, Major League Baseball has been around a long time, and as have the Atlanta Braves. And I think about the work that you've been able to do through like driving equity and embedding kind of this sense of inclusion throughout your career, and really looking at that through your partnerships, community partnerships, through your front office. Like, how have you really stopped to think strategically about approaching this differently from your lens?
I think the biggest thing that we really had to start thinking about, because people, when you talk to them about baseball, they love baseball. I have so many people that talk to me about stories, either with their grandparents or experiences that they've had. One of the things that we really wanted to make sure that we honed into is that we wanted people to feel like you're welcome. We do a great job when we talk about that with our fans, and we needed to make sure that that is also how we show up with our staff, with our vendors, with our community partners, that it is a welcoming atmosphere, because the ideal is that regardless of who you are, you feel welcomed in this environment. And so that was one of the things that was a driving force in terms of strategically how do we think about this when we look at staff, when we talk about the fact that we want to bring people into the organization. We want you to feel just as welcomed as you are as a staff person as you would be as a fan. And so a lot of the conversation around what does welcoming look like, and it looks like how you have to show up and say, I know that I want to be a part of this team. And then what does that mean? Being a part of a team means that you feel like you're valued, you're included, that the things that motivate you, we can make sure that we hone into and make it a part of what the fabric of our organization is. And so outside of thinking about all of the other later layers when you talk about culture, the biggest one we start with is welcoming. And once we start that part, we then can encourage all of the other things that are critical for someone when they start their career, or if they're mid managers, or if they are coming here and just wanting to work as a game day staff. We start it as being welcome, and then we continue it on in terms of all of the things that makes you part of the organization and makes you realize that you're a fabric of the organization. I tell this story all the time. We have 2,600 game day staff every season. 60% of that staff returns. 60% of that staff that returns, their average
Wow.
tenure is between 10 and 15 years. That means I have on staff individuals that have worked all three ballparks within the metro areas of Atlanta and had been with the Atlanta Braves since then. It becomes a tradition, it becomes a legacy. And that's what we want to think about when we think about culture and ensuring that people feel welcome regardless of the walk that you have in your life to be here.
Nancy, do you see that in the role where you are? I mean, you guys were certainly an OG, women's football club. Alex Morgan famously is one of the owners of it, and spends a lot of time within that club. How do you take that from a women's sports perspective? Like, how do you over rotate on that in terms of equity? Do you feel like that's a calling card for you because of also the rise of women's sports and trying to achieve all of these things within your community?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be part of this discussion. I think that talking about culture as an embedded practice is really important. We heard a lot of organizations over the last 6, 8 months that could just do away with their DEI programs, and you hear that and you think, well, that was never who you were. That's not part of your DNA. And I'm very fortunate to be with a club and a league where it is part of our DNA. And so we really make sure that we are looking that the practices that we have across the employee lifespan, they're really embedded into our operation. So they're not this add-on thought and some extra program that we've thought about. We're making sure we cast a wide net when we recruit. We make sure we're doing training around performance reviews and that we're eliminating unconscious bias. We make sure we're succession planning and investing in people so that they can take the next step up, which I think is a huge area we need to focus on, and not to get too excited about promoting somebody because of who they are, but making sure they're ready so it's a success for everybody. So absolutely, that is who we are, and make sure we live that.
Danette, do you see like how do you see that what organizations across like your ecosystem are actually really pushing, because we're all working in our little silos. Nancy's working in her team trying to make her community, be that within her own company and then in her team and then the broader company and then even the broader landscape of women's sports, a better place. DeRetta's doing that certainly within her metro area. Pete, you're working at it from a brand lens and trying to work across globally how to do this. What organizations are out there like really pushing forward on this too? Obviously, besides the amazing Women's Sports Foundation and the work that you guys do.
But it's a great question there. I think for me, I take it back to just more about how the challenge has been across kind of our landscape for decades. I think this has never been, like we always going to say, women's sports is it's a team sport, and advancing equity and as well as advancing women's sports is a team sport. Being an organization that was founded by Billie Jean King and seeing, one of the first sports to really create that equitable both for men and women and equal pay in tennis, what she did obviously in her sport, and you see the success of tennis today, and you see the success they're about to walk into the US Open and see obviously equal pay, in New York. That was done decades ago. I mean, you and I and Pete spent a lot of time having conversations. This moment in time in women's sports is not a coincidence. It's because of legislation like Title IX. We always say, welcome to the women's sports party. There's plenty of room at the table. The reality, yes, like please come. I think for me, it's really important that it takes a village. And I know that seems really silly to say. And there are so many organizations now that are really engaged in the investing in understanding the importance of true diversity and equity, especially when it comes to building leaders and building teams. And I always remind people, women's sports takes men. Like we need incredibly strong, very big, incredibly male allies and all. Like this isn't a female or a male thing. This is, if you really want an incredibly diverse workforce, if you really want to make change and do good business, you want equity, because it really allows for you to have the most robust, the most thought provocative type of team and organization that's going to allow you to be successful in business. And I think women's sports is facing that today, that we've had a lot of silos, a lot of niches. I kind of giggle being in this role now after spending so much time in college athletics on the NBA and WNBA side and coming into this role. It's very clear to me that every women's sport has the exact same problem. They're just on different trajectories. And if we do a better job of collaborating and working together, cross functioning, men's sports, women's sports, brands like Pete and Deloitte and what they're doing, and really look at this in a more holistic way, I think you're going to recognize that sports is just a microcosm of what's happened across society. And it's always been that way. And women's sports is a great example of challenges that women have faced, no matter if they're in sports or just in the normal private sector jobs. It can be compensation, equal pay, it can be leadership. We love that the common denominator of developing future leaders happens to be sports, male or female. And we have proven that time and time again in our research. We all know the great stats. There's not a lot of other data that shows what is the common denominator of leaders, and it happens to be sport participation. And it does not matter what level sport you play at, because you learn the intangibles. And that's why for the Women's Sports Foundation, we want both girls and boys to have equal opportunity to play sport. And we have to protect legislation like Title IX to make sure that we continue to allow that to happen. And this moment is about 51 years old, 52 years old for a reason. It takes generations to make this change. And it takes generations of those leaders that have grown up with girls and boys playing sports to now be in positions of power to make decisions on the business side and on the investment side. And I think that's why now you're seeing a bit of a tipping point in women's sports. It's been a long time coming, but we still have a long way to go. So hopefully that helps to
Sure.
answer that.
Yeah, sure. But I also think we've seen a lot of momentum, I would say, just around equity and inclusion, full stop, not irrespective of women's sports within the sports space, certainly coming through 2020 and all of the social justice moments that we had throughout the time there, and then beyond. And so I think, how do we continue that momentum? Like, DeRetta, how are you guys thinking about continuing to press forward on equity as a team, as a human that has to sit within an organization to make sure we're holding each other accountable for that? Like, how do you do that every day?
So I think there's a really great point that's being made, because one of the things is that it's not just women in sports, but it's women that are in our front offices and that are carrying executive positions and that are raising to levels with which I would say to you are record numbers that we've ever seen. And even when you think about broadcasting. So when you start talking about making sure that you are creating prolific numbers around that, it has to start with what type of development programs are you doing? What type of ways are you ensuring that if someone comes and decides they want their career to be in sports, and maybe they started on a field and now they see themselves as being valuable in a front office, what is the organization doing to ensure that they're developing, that they're creating trajectory, that they're providing mentoring, that they're providing sponsorship through this process? What I can say is that one of the things, and I can speak for our ball club, and then I can also speak to at the MLB level, is that there's intention around speaking about any type of programs that we're doing that are ensuring that we're creating environments with which women feel like they are able to advance. It's interesting. We have our Women in Baseball ERG, and one of the things that we talk about in there is that there's a lot that's focused on development, but what else is focused on is those individuals that are sponsors, those individuals that are allies, to ensure that they are shepherding women in their career throughout our organization. I have been with the Atlanta Braves for 7 seasons, and I can safely say to you that I know that our numbers of promotion of women have increased at least by 60% in the last 6 years. To me, that's something that needs to be discussed. But the thing is it is person by person. I hate to say the word is hand-to-hand combat, so I won't use combat. What I'll say is more around the things that you have to do to make sure you're intentional, that you're doing sustainable programs, that you're ensuring that it's redundancy in those programs so that individuals are having the opportunity to develop their own skills, to upscale them, for them to be able to see trajectory in their role now and where they can go to. And I think that's something that has to be discussed so we continue to do. And representation is part of that. If I see someone that looks like me, I am excited about the fact that that means I could too get into that role. I can too advance in my career in this particular organization. So I think those are the things that we have to continue to talk about, because it begins to spread it out from so many things. Because the talent that we see on the field, I would emphatically say to you, I want to see also within our boardroom and within our executive positions and within the organization as well.
Amazing. Okay, so quickly, because we have to wrap this party up already, I'd like to, DeRetta, thank you for that, because I think that's good in terms of like what's the action step, right? So Pete, Nancy, Danette, what would you guys compel other people to do? Like, what's the thing that you either feel like this is what I'm setting out to do in the next quarter, or I'd like for you guys to do to have other people join me? Like, Pete, what would you want people to do?
The biggest thing there, I'd say, is for people to get educated on the topic, right? I mean, there's lots of great research out there. You've done some, Danette's done some. Other people are out there, and just understand that what the challenge is, because it actually has both, I would say, societal implications, but also business implications. I mean, the one thing we know is that fans want this, right? This is not just a good thing to do or the right thing to do. It's what the business demands moving forward. So understanding the challenge, understanding fan points of view is one thing. The other thing I'll just say is the biggest thing I'd like to see changed is fewer people that look like me making these decisions and more people like the rest of you guys actually making these decisions in these organizations. That'll overnight change a bunch of things.
We love our allies, though. Nancy.
Yeah, I think I would add, we've talked about creating a culture where people can succeed and they see the path forward and up the career ladder. But I would also encourage you to make sure you're creating a culture where it's okay to fail. We want people to learn and grow, and you have to feel comfortable failing, and not like that's going to bench you and hold you back for another year. So make sure that you've created a safe space for people to think outside the box, to try something new, to stretch their skill set, and feel safe in your organization to take some risks.
Thank you. Danette.
I think for me, it's about intentionality and being deliberate in kind of each of your core values as an organization, right? And I think in this space in particular, when sports has been such a team sport, collaboration is one of the most critical things. And I would like to say that when we're on the floor, we're on the court, we're competitive with each other. But when we're not, we should all be working with each other to establish and build those best practices and share those. I think I've seen for so long a lot of the siloed approach to advancing the business, advancing now running a not-for-profit, advancing real impact work, advancing investment at all levels. I think we can be much better together. And I think we can learn from each other's best practices, but be more deliberate and intentional and recognizing that that is how we're going to move industries forward, but also move some of these greater societal challenges forward. And I'm very hopeful that we're going to see, not just from a business perspective in women's sports, but also as it relates to what Pete said and leaders and culture, that we start to recognize the power of that diversity across the landscape, both men and women, and see that ability for it to really grow. And we represent, I know for a lot of us who've worked in sports, you represent who your rosters look like. And I think that's really important for us to pay attention to. So intentionality, collaboration, and being deliberate, I think, are things that this industry needs to do much better at.
Yeah, and I would add actually simplifying, like doing a lot of things doesn't mean necessarily doing the best thing. So anyway, listen, you guys have been amazing. I wish we could talk for a lot longer about all this because it's important stuff. And I feel like all of us could probably solve some of the problems happening out there, or at least give some good indicators as to how to solve them.